my father often told me when I was just a lad, a sailor's life is very hard, the food is always bad. But now I've joined the Navy, I'm aboard a man of war, and now I found a sailor ain't a sailor anymore. Don't haul on the rope, don't climb up the mast. If you see a sailing ship, it might be your last. Just get your civvies ready for another on the shore. A sailor ain't a sailor, ain't a sailor anymore.
Yes, we are going to talk about Rope today. A little bit later in the week, you're going to hear a show that we did. We've recorded it already about the Hitchcock movie Rope and about Hitchcock in general and about the play Rope, an adaptation of the original material. And we thought, well, as long as we're doing that, why not do an entire show on Rope? And conveniently, someone wrote an entire book about Rope. And before we get to him, I think when we talk about the defining features of civilization, the quantum leaps that made us the civilizations that we are or pass for being. You tend to talk about the ability to make fire would be the first one. Maybe the invention of the wheel would be the second one. And then probably the skip intro button. I think those are the three big ones. But rope makes a pretty good case for itself, as you're about to hear. But before we do that, just to warm everybody up, I came across, right as we were talking about doing the show, a passage from Cormac McCarthy's All the Pretty Horses about Rope. They stood looking at the horses. The horses shifted and stood, gray shapes in the gray morning. Stacked on the ground outside the gate were coils of every kind of rope, cotton and manila, and plaited rawhide and maguey and ishte, down to lengths of old woven hair mecates and hand-plaited piecings of binder twine. Stacked against the fence were the 16 rope hackamores they'd spent the evening tying in the bunkhouse. So only Cormac McCarthy would know that many different kinds of rope, except for also our guest today, the author of Rope, How a Bundle of Twisted Fibers Became the Backbone of Civilization, Tim Queeny. Tim Queeny, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Colin. Great to be here.
And it is not entirely fanciful to suggest that rope might be one of the defining features, one of the leaps that humankind had to make to advance itself. But quickly make the case for that idea.
Well, as you say, fire is probably the first, and I would actually say probably stone tools would be number two, and then I'm going to say rope because it's once you have fire you can cook things and keep warm, and then once you have stone tools to cut things up, cut up your hunt, the results of your hunt, then you need a way to organize your stuff, and just like people today need to organize their stuff, people in prehistory needed to organize their stuff, and a great way to do that is to tie it in bundles with rope. It's a great way to start organizing your world around you.
Yeah, we might mention the movie Rope a little bit later, but one of the little twists there, so to speak, is that the rope is also used to tie up a bundle of books to that point. And you might have a yak, but how are you going to keep the yak from walking away while you're taking a nap or something, right? I mean, that's another thing that rope does right away.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, of course, for many early people, having a domesticated animal was a huge, gigantic, their biggest asset. So you certainly want to be able to tie that animal up to a tree and not have it wander off.
So one thing you probably don't know about me is I have a rather large amount of Neanderthal DNA, according to 23andMe. I'm kind of a Neanderthal activist. I think we should get reparations for everything. So I wasn't surprised to find out who invented rope, but we can't really necessarily say this, but we do know now the first available example of rope. So tell us about that.
Yes. So as you say, we don't really know exactly who invented it because the main thing about rope is that it was in those days, it was made out of plant fibers, and those things tended to rot and disintegrate. So the oldest rope ever made, who knows, could have gone back even further than this one. But the oldest rope that's ever been discovered and verified is 50,000 years old. And it was found in a cave in southeastern France near the Rhone River. And it was made with the classic S and Z twists. It's 3 strands. And that was being made by Neanderthals. So The people who discovered it, the Dr. Bruce Hardy from Kenyon College, and some of his collaborators, they make the point that this represents abstract mathematical thinking on the part of Neanderthals, that they could remember that they twisted the strands one way and then twisted them the other way to make the final ropes, because you have to do the twists in an opposite fashion as you build up the rope.
Yeah, Bruce Hardy has been on this show, by the way. And I told him at the time, don't patronize us Neanderthals. Don't say, oh, you did abstract thinking. Yeah, of course we did abstract thinking. We invented all kinds of stuff. And rope was invented by Marty, one of the Neanderthals. So we should also talk, as long as we're talking about sort of early finds involving human beings, the find of the discovery of Otzi, the Iceman, as you point out in the book, is not necessarily divorced from rope. Explain that connection too.
Well, of course, Otzi was found in a glacier in the Alps and by some hikers, and he was several thousand years old, his body, and on with him he had a whole array of clothing and materials that he was carrying, including some bows and bowstrings. And bowstrings, in my book, I use a very wide definition of rope. So I'm using everything from cordage and string up to three-strand rope up to wire rope. So it's all rope to me. And so Otzi was carrying these bowstrings, and he needed, and also he was carrying a knife, a flint knife. Then that knife was attached to the handle using cordage to lash it on there. So there were a lot of uses of rope that he had on his person, and he was originally thought to have sort of died in the glacier and been covered over. But a few years after his discovery, they were doing an X-ray of him, and they found that he had an arrow head embedded in his shoulder, which had probably cut one of his major arteries. And so it's likely that Otzi was either murdered or died as a result of some long-forgotten war.
But yes, obviously rope, bowstring was involved. I mean, I'm sure it's like a Bob Newhart routine. They were probably standing around saying, throwing the arrows is just not working. We've got to do something other than throw the arrows. What is there? Does anybody have any ideas? And as long as we're also back in antiquity, one of the things that's typically not in people's minds, or perhaps even on exhibits when we think about the pyramids, is rope. But no rope, no move stone, right?
That's right. I mean, you can have 1,000 workers all standing there ready to move a 2.5-ton stone into your pyramid, but not all 1,000 of those can get their hands on it to push it. So the best way to do it is to put a rope around that stone, put it out in front of the stone, and then you can get everybody hauling away on it.
You were saying before you have a pretty broad definition of what rope is, but it also raises the question, and we go back to Bruce Hardy looking at the Neanderthal find. What constitutes rope? What makes rope rope? What's the minimum threshold something has to cross to be rope?
Well, I think it has to be twisted fibers, and that could be a single twist of fibers, which isn't going to be terribly strong, or two twists of fibers, two strands that have been twisted together. All through history, the most prevalent type of rope used has been three-strand, where you have three strands that are twisted together. Each strand, of course, is twisted together from separate fibers that are twisted into yarns, and then those yarns are twisted into fibers, and the fibers are twisted into the final rope. And at each step, as you're going up the ladder there, you're twisting the fibers the opposite way that you twisted before. So to make the fibers into yarns, you're twisting maybe with a right-hand twist, and then the yarns into strands, you're using a left-hand twist, and so on as you go up. So the two twists are working against each other to help keep the rope together.
I mean, we're going to focus in on one of the things in your book in just a second here. But before we do that, I just want to point to the idea that I think a lot of people are thinking, well, if you're a sailor or maybe a mountaineer or something, you use ropes these days. But what do ropes have to do with modernity? I was reading about the fact that there are a whole bunch of niche jobs like inspecting big dams, cleaning Mount Rushmore, repairing offshore oil platforms. But the latest thing is wind farms. There is this rope access to wind farms. It's like when you think about these wind turbines, you've got to get to them to repair them, to fix a broken blade or something like that. How are you going to do it? And so, I mean, Tim, the usage of rope is very contemporary and modern.
Oh, absolutely. Arborists, all the people working in trees around the world, they're all using ropes to do that. Certainly, I interviewed someone who was a spelunker, and he actually was putting in rope lines in caves, going deep underground in caves, and doing it for the National Park Service. And of course, they need to use rope to do that. So there's many uses of rope, and as you point out, wind turbine workers are sort of like alpinists or rock climbers using rope to rappel down and get to the blades and do the various things that they need to do. So yeah, rope is still very widely used.
Yeah, if you would like to induce vertigo in yourself, there are a lot of YouTube videos of rope access to wind turbines, and it really doesn't look particularly safe, and it's very dizzying. But let's go back in time, considerably back in time, back to antiquity again, and let's add to our conversation Manuel Medrano, PhD candidate at Harvard's History Department, who studies quipus, and both he and the quipus are featured prominently in Tim's book. So, Tim, maybe set it up, and then we'll have Manny tell us a little bit more about it. But what are we talking about here?
Well, actually, yeah, Manny's the guy to talk about the quipus. He knows far more than I do. And I interviewed him, as you said, for the book. These quipus were really a fabulous way of gathering data and recording data by using knotted ropes, and where the knot was in the rope and and the type of knot used would signify the number. So you had a pretty sophisticated way of moving data around with these quipus, which were these assemblies of knotted rope, and you could, a runner could stuff one in his pocket and take it from one habitation to the next along the marvelous Incan roads. So it was really an incredible invention. And it wasn't just the Incans who used this knotted ropes for data and census information, but it's actually pretty widely used all over the world by many cultures.
Manuel Medrano, let's have you talk a little bit about this. This is an idea. It's a thing that spoke to you, I think, almost upon your seeing it. You had a whole different plan for your life. I think you might have still been an undergraduate in college and a whole different idea what you were going to do with your life. Talk about that, and what did the quipus say to you when you looked at it?
Well, first of all, thanks for the invite and having me on the show, and congrats, Tim, on your new book.
Thank you.
My first encounter with the quipu was during an undergraduate lecture course on the Inca Empire. And at the time, studying economics and applied mathematics, something really spoke to me about the object, that it is such a distinctive way of, as Tim has mentioned, of recording information. It has a three-dimensional quality, which for specialists who work on ancient records and on ancient documents, that is just so striking. Right, that texture and fiber has a signifying role in the quipu, and we can study it as such. So ever since that first encounter in 2016, I have worked on the quipu, which remains not fully deciphered. Another way of putting it, we can't yet read most of what the quipus say. And so we have been able to understand what the numbers are on the strings for about 100 years. And any specialist can walk up to a quipu in a museum and go left to right on the chord, saying this chord records the number 27, and the one next to it is 145. But 27 what? 145 what? It's counting things or people or services or processes. And the big question of the moment and of the ongoing work on quipus is how to decipher the remaining components.
Yeah. My tax preparer uses a quipu. You might want to talk to him. I don't know exactly. It was off-putting at first. But could you, Manny, just describe what it looks like? It's like I think it's like a horizontal rope and then other ropes hanging down from it. Is that how it typically presents?
Yes. So picture a thick horizontal cord And from it, like icicles, hang between 1 and over 1,000, sometimes thinner cords, which specialists call pendant cords because they hang from the main cord. And what one would see looking at it is that on each of these pendant cords, or on most of them at least, that there's knots, and that those knots are tied at regular intervals. And so looking at one in a museum, for many folks who see it for the first time, it is just unlike almost anything they've ever seen. And in part, this is because they're displayed in museums in lots of different ways, right? So when a kipu enters a museum, the conservator will often mount it and sew it onto a backing, so that almost like onto an easel. And that means at least that when it's displayed, it has this very flat 2D structure almost. And that's a necessary evil, of course, of preserving it and putting it on display. But it's always important to remember that these would have been rolled up and then stored for long distance travel, and that they were manipulated by running your hands along it. And so even though it has this 2D character when we look at it on a wall or on the screen with a picture of one, this is a 3D recording system. It's a 3D script.
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming that it was kind of like an abacus, in that you sort of move things around a little bit in order to get what it is that you're trying to count or calculate.
It ends up being that the results of the calculations were recorded on the kipu, and the Incas used a different device that was called a upana in order to carry out the calculations. And that upana, that second device, was the Inca abacus. The challenge is for archaeologists, and I'm in a history department, but for archaeologists, the challenge has been it's been very difficult to track down, to discover upanas in situ in archaeological sites. And so in some ways, we only have the results of those calculations that survive in the quipus. And it's almost like if you only had the last version of the Excel sheet you saved, that Excel doesn't preserve the full record of each calculation that was run in it. And so because of that, the upana remains this big mystery that kind of sits to the side of the quipu.
We should say that Manuel Medrano is in Peru right now doing research, a PhD candidate in Harvard's history department, studying quipus. We're very grateful for you taking the time to be with us today. You know, Tim, with something like this, we're lucky that Manny has stuff to look at, because maybe one reason that rope is downplayed a little bit is maybe not uppermost in people's minds when they think about the advances of civilization, is that it doesn't survive very well. If you go to look at the pyramids, they probably don't have a whole lot of samples of the rope that was used to pull the stones. Could you say a little bit more about that, about the kind of evanescent quality of rope?
Yeah, that's right. Because if it was made from plant fibers and not something that was guaranteed to last a long time, generally most of ancient rope has been rotted and then disintegrated. So it's very hard to study it because you can't find it. And you know, the rope that was found by Dr. Hardy was 50,000 years old, but who knows? Maybe there was 60,000 or 70,000-year-old rope that we just don't know about because it is disintegrated long ago. So that's certainly an issue. But one of the things that I did find, which was amazing to me, and one of the things that really prompted me to write the book when I first saw this picture, was the coils of rope found in the boat pit alongside the Great Pyramid. That was this disassembled boat that was for the pharaoh to use in the afterlife, we think. And in that pit were these coils of 3-strand rope that looked like they had just been made a few months ago. This rope is 4,500 years old. Mm-hmm. So that really sparked my imagination as to how amazing even early civilizations were at making rope.
Well, we should say also, obviously, another thing that ropes did was hold boats together, or even in Acts of the Apostles, a boat that's about to fall apart, they get it back together with a rope so Paul doesn't drown. There's fascinating stuff in this book. So we're going to grab a quick break here. There's so much more we have to talk about with Tim Queeny. We're going to do that after this. Yeah, we're talking about ropes with Tim Queeny, author of Rope, How a Bundle of Twisted Fibers Became the Backbone of Civilization, among other books. And Tim, one of the people that you talk to, speaking of tight ropes, is Philippe Petit. He's been on the show a couple of times. And it's sort of interesting, too, because ropes are in our culture, as you point out in the book, in a lot of different ways. And we kind of go into this. We will go into this. But that, even just that image of any kind of tightrope walker, but especially Petit, there's something, I don't know. I mean, it's some kind of very persistent metaphor, too, right? I mean, it is what it is, but it's also some kind of presentation of maybe what life is really like.
Yeah, it's a great metaphor for all of us as we make our way through life, trying to stay balanced.
And one of the points that you make about Petit is, too, that we think of this as some kind of incredibly, tensile cable that he was walking across. But there was a lot of rope and lines, stuff like that, because getting the cable across involved this whole series of stages of different kinds of rope.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the way they initially got the first one across was actually just the thinnest possible monofilament fishing line, which they shot across with an arrow. And famously, Philippe, they couldn't see it because it was dark. They were doing this early in the morning because they wanted to get everything set up just as dawn was breaking. And Philippe, they couldn't see the line, so Philippe actually took all his clothes off and walked around until he felt the monofilament on his thigh, and then they found it, and they brought that monofilament across, and then a slightly heavier piece, and then a slightly heavier piece of rope, until finally it was time to haul across this 3/4 inch steel wire rope that was quite heavy, and actually they had some problems with it, but they finally got it across.
I had forgotten until reading that section of the book that he did it 8 times. If I ever survived doing it once, I was done. I was like, good. Proved my point, whatever that was. Nope. What's he got going is back and forth. I'm getting dizzy just thinking about that. But yeah, when you look through mythology, you go through a lot of the things about the Minotaur or the Gordian knot. I think a lot about the Gordian knot. Maybe remind people what that legend is and then how Alexander enters into it.
Yeah, so there's this town of Gordia in Asia Minor, present-day Turkey, and Alexander had crossed into Asia Minor and was making his way and came to this town, and they famously had a knot tied in the sort of their town hall, and the legend was anybody who could untie that knot would control all of Asia. And it's a great story because Alexander, in his very forthright way, looked at the knot a bit, and then he pulled out his sword and cut it in half rather than trying to untie it. So he did sever the knot, not quite the way they had intended, and then he went on to go all the way to the Indus River. So he didn't get all of Asia, but he conquered quite a bit of it.
Another point that you make is the way that we use ropes and knots to talk about life in general or work in general. I hadn't really thought about that idea that when somebody, is new at a job or something, we say, well, somebody show Francesca the ropes, show them the ropes, then she'll learn the ropes, then she'll know the ropes. It hadn't occurred to me, this is an idiotic eureka moment, but that this probably comes from sailing, the knowledge that's required for sailing.
Yes, because in the age of sail, there were so many ropes that a new sailor had to learn. They had to learn those ropes, and they had to be able to go on deck at night in a storm. And when someone told them to loose a certain rope or tighten a certain rope, they had to know which rope to do it. And they couldn't. They weren't labeled, so they really did have to learn the ropes. I spoke to one of the staff at the New Bedford Whaling Museum, and I asked about this, and he said that in 1840s American whaling ship might have 117 running rigging ropes that the sailor had to learn. And that's just the running rigging, the rigging that controls the sails and the yard arms. There's also all the standing rigging that had to be learned as well.
Well, one of my favorite stories in the book is it turns out Captain Kirk was not the first ship captain to say warp factor 3. That warping turns out to be something that was used to get the U.S. Constitution out of trouble. They were facing 5 enemy boats, and they were a little bit becalmed. And so they did 2 things that involved ropes. You should say both of them. First one involved small boats going ahead of the U.S. Constitution, right?
Right. Yeah, they were being chased by all these British warships, Royal Navy warships, and they were trying to get away, but the wind had died. So Isaac Hull, who was the captain, decided to put all the ship's boats out ahead of the Constitution, all tied back to the ship with ropes, and the sailors just were rowing the Constitution away from the British ships that were chasing them, and of course the British ships started copying they started doing the exact same thing. So it was this slow motion chase. That was sort of the first part of it.
Yeah, and then talk about warp factor.
And then so one of the lieutenants on board said, "Hey, we have this small anchor called a kedge anchor. Let's tie all the rope that we have on board, extra rope, and they had quite a bit of it because they had lots of rope for rigging the vessel specifically if it had been in a battle and they need to. So they had lots of spare rope, and let's put all the spare rope together. And they did that into a line that was more than a mile long, and they attached it to this small kedge anchor, brought that kedge anchor way out in front of the Constitution and dropped it. And they're off the New Jersey coast. They're only in about 100 feet of water or so. So they were able to drop it to the bottom. And then the sailors, using a big windlass called a capstan, the sailors on deck were moving the capstan around so that it was slowly winching the Constitution forward toward the kedge anchor. And once they got to the kedge anchor, they raised it, brought it forward again, and dropped it again. So they were slowly dragging themselves forward. And then the British also started copying that as well. So the second part of this incredibly low-speed chase that went on for hours and hours and hours. It was just, I don't know how these sailors did it. They must have been completely exhausted.
It all involved, we did a whole show on nominative determinism, the idea that your name may determine your profession. The captain was Captain Hull. It's a good name for a ship captain. And that came to be called warping. That's actually what they call this whole idea, kind of pulling your ship forward using an anchor ahead of you. I know that at one point in your book, Rope, you had a chapter about Hitchcock's Rope, the movie Rope, and they made you cut it because it turns out it's, some people might think, how could you write a whole book about rope? No, the problem turned out to be, how could you write a reasonably sized book about rope that wasn't too huge? So since all of your research shouldn't go to waste, say what you want here about Hitchcock's movie Rope, which we should say is about a murder. It takes place at the very beginning of the movie. It involves the use of a rope to strangle or garrote somebody, and then that rope is around for a while.
Right. Yeah. And it's quite a movie because it was Hitchcock decided to make this film in a way that he had never shot any of his other films, where each scene, it's cut together to make it appear as if it's all one continuous take, but in fact it's not, because there was only about 20 minutes of film in each magazine in the camera. So they had to change film magazines. So they very cleverly had someone step in front of the camera or have an object in front of the camera so they could make a cut. But they were these 20-minute long takes, and they built a special set where they could move walls and furniture around.
Probably using ropes.
Yeah, probably using rope. And then, of course, the rope has the starring role as both the tool of the murder, but also the way that Jimmy Stewart figures out who the murderers are.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I had a hard time wrapping my mind around, whenever this idea comes up, I don't get it, but you help me understand it. But in the future, a kind of rope, something that could plausibly be described as rope, may help us get things and people into space. This might be a good place for us to verge towards as we move to the end of our conversation. But yeah, tell us about the space elevator. How's that going to work?
Yeah, the space elevator always draws lots of questions at the end of my talks because it is just an absolutely crazy idea where you attach one end of a tether to the surface of the Earth, which as the Earth spins, it's moving at 900 miles an hour at the equator. So it's moving pretty fast. If you attach that tether to the Earth and then you put that tether out 100,000 kilometers to a weight out in space, that weight is going to want to fly off in a straight line, but the tether is keeping it from doing so. So it's whipping its way around the Earth, keeping up with the with the surface of the Earth, but scribing a much larger circle. So it's moving very fast. And what happens, the end result of that is you end up with this bar tight tether that's going from the surface of the Earth up into space. And now you can put a crawler on that, and that crawler can crawl up the tether. And when you get up to 23,000 miles high, which is geosynchronous orbit, you can open the doors and push your satellite out, and it's now in geosynchronous orbit.
Yeah, you should really have two space elevators because there's always like some cosmonaut who's holding the door on the other one, and you just have to really wait a long time. That's the problem we have at this building right now. So let's, as we head towards the end, and this is a bit of a fascinating conversation with you, Tim Queeny, author of Rope, How a Bundle of Twisted Fibers Became the Backbone of Civilization. We can use rope as a metaphor for unity, right? One of the things that's kind of interesting about rope is how it combines to be stronger than it would have otherwise. But I'm sure you could say that much more eloquently than I just did.
Right. Well, yeah, you said it. If rope is made out of lots of very small fibers, and those fibers individually couldn't really do very much work. But if you put those fibers together, you spin them together into yarns, and then make them into strands, and then make them into rope. Now they're much stronger than they would be individually. So working as a group, they can do amazing things like build pyramids or drag stones to Stonehenge or do other amazing things. And that's sort of the same thing as people. Individually, we can't probably do very much on our own, but if we work together in groups, we can do amazing things.
Or to take one of your epigraphs by Ben Franklin, at present we are like separate filaments of flax before the thread is formed, without strength, because without connection. But union would make us strong. Tim, this has been just a fascinating conversation, and I love the book. I love the concept. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, so thanks so much for having me, Colin.
All right, we're about to go away. We're going to come back. We're going to talk to you about robotic double Dutch, sort of. But if you like this kind of thing, the kind of thing that we do, people are going to ask you to support CT Public. If you like specifically what happens on the Colin McEnroe Show, consider pledging right now. Time to say a thank you or two, starting with the maestro, Dylan Reyes, our technical producer. This particular episode is produced by Lily Tyson Quality Entertainment Productions, which I think is in the process of acquiring HBO Max. Has that been finalized yet? Do we know? We don't know yet. All right. So joining us now, we wanted to talk about double Dutch because that's one of the many interesting uses of rope, and also because there's been quite a technical breakthrough in the world of double Dutch. Joining us to talk about that is Tahira Reed Smith, professor of mechanical engineering and design and the director of the Reed Lab at Penn State. She's also the patented inventor of the automatic double Dutch machine and the founder of Jump Dreams Incorporated. Welcome to our conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
So am I right that this idea actually popped into your head in third grade at PS 97?
It absolutely did. Yes.
So say what the idea was and the context in which you suddenly thought of it.
Sure. So in third grade, there was a poster contest that was going on, and we had to draw a picture of something we wish we could have. And so I'm about to date myself. At that time, a lot of the kids I remember drawing posters of rocket ships and astronauts because the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster had just happened. But I was an only child at the time, and I really enjoyed double Dutch. And I said, man, I wish I could have a machine that could just turn the ropes, because I didn't get enough double Dutch time at school, and I didn't always get a chance to do that in my neighborhood. And so I drew this picture. It was a larger scale poster at the time. And I actually won first prize in the poster contest for this idea.
Well, you're sort of addressing at least two problems. One of them is, what if there aren't enough people available to turn the ropes when you want to jump? But the other one I would assume also would be kind of precision and repetition. If you're really, really good at this, if you're doing it at a fairly elite level, it's not the human factor could be a real problem if the ropes are a little bit different every time they come around. I assume that's another advantage of having it done in a more calibrated mechanical way.
Absolutely. Yes, because humans get tired turning. I experienced that at an event. I'm part of the 40 plus Double Dutch Club, and I did a lot of turning at our play date, and some people got more tired than I did. But a machine doesn't get tired. And the prototype that I have, I was able to just capture like 15 continuous minutes of it turning the same way nonstop. And that was awesome. And the other added benefit, even though it started out as an idea for an only child, there's actually some value and benefit in that you could have multiple people enjoying Double Dutch without having to turn. And what I saw in my interactions with real people at this, it was the annual play date, was that people want to jump. People do not want to spend time turning, or some people just don't have the skills to turn with that continuous rhythm for a long time.
So you thought of this in third grade and then kind of forgot about it for a while. And then I think it popped back up at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute.
Yes, it popped back up in my sophomore design class, and the theme that semester was challenging the limits in sports and recreational activities. And it didn't come to me immediately. I was thinking of the obvious sports, basketball, football, soccer. I remember thinking about those, and then I had the aha moment like, oh my gosh, that idea that I had in third grade, that's a recreational activity. And I tell you that the rest is history.
Can you help people picture what it is we're talking about in terms of the prototype? Is it like R2D2 turning ropes, or what would we see if we saw it?
So if you saw it, what the prototype looks like now, you could actually see a demo of it at jumpdreamsinc.com. You could see me testing it out. And so essentially what it looks like, there's these two stands that have supports and there's rotating arms on both sides, and they turn the ropes mimicking what humans do. It doesn't look like R2D2, but I can't compare what it looks like, but it's a nice, sleek design that a company in California helped me to put together, Spec Design in San Jose. And that's what it looks like.
So then the question is, who's your Chuck Yeager? You know, who are the people who are the test pilots of this? I assume you are one of those people.
Yes, I'm a test pilot, but I am in the process now of setting up usability studies just to get feedback from people, just to get initial reactions, initial responses. I'll definitely, I'm in Pennsylvania, and so there's different groups that are here. Like I plan to go visit, say, Philly Girls Jump or some places like that, just to get feedback from people who are actually doing it. And then in particular, though, wanting to target specific groups such as those in physical therapy. Like maybe this tool could help individuals getting over certain upper body, maybe shoulder injuries or something of that kind. We've talked to physical therapists that have seen value in a machine like this. We've also talked to people in athletics that see value in something like this too. And so it'll just be exploring those avenues with potential customers.
Is there, first of all, you are going to want to get third graders to use this at some point to test this. I assume when you're talking about some of those groups, you want to have some fairly little kids try this out.
So there is a broader group of what we call novices, people who haven't jumped before, and that could include adults. I've met adults in, say, their 30s that said, man, I wish I learned when I was a kid and I didn't get a chance to. And so certainly this could reach young children because a lot of the kids don't know Double Dutch. And so, but we broadly say novices at this point.
You know, we have the whole mythology in America of John Henry challenging a machine. And I do wonder, there probably are some people who think, oh, no, another thing that robots are going to take over, another human activity. What do you say when you hear that?
Absolutely not. We will never get rid of humans. We still will need humans. But what this machine can do is, let's say, you just want some time on the weekend to just practice. It's the same way the concept has not taken away rowing, right? It's a rowing machine, but people still go out and row on water. And so I feel like in the same way, it's a supplement. It's something to support people in their goals, but it should never take away the human connection.
This is a fascinating project, and Tahira Reed-Smith, thank you so much for your time today, Professor of Mechanical Engineering and Design and the Director of the Reed Lab at Penn State, also the patented inventor of the automatic double Dutch machine. Go to Jump Dreams Incorporated. Go to their website. You can see what this is all about. I do also want to say here, as we're kind of winding down this show and we're kind of going down the home stretch of this pledge, that yes, a lot of you do tune into the Colin McEnroe Show because we have kind of odd ideas about what a topic is. So this week it's Rope on one day, and then we're going to talk actually about the Hitchcock movie Rope and about Hitchcock in general on another day. If that's the kind of eclecticism that you value, please consider pledging. Nice people are going to ask you to pledge, and listen to them, open your hearts, and help us out.
Undoes the buttons all down her back. Bubblegum in a dish. How many pieces do you kiss? Not one. 'Cause he